Hello friends, how are you doing today? My name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch. So today I am doing kind of a recent reads wrap up. I don't know if I'm going to start doing these or if I'll miss doing the monthly wrap ups. I might just alternate, but for now I want to share the 4 books with you that I started reading in March and finished in April. They're books that I really enjoyed. I think I'm going to probably want to talk a little bit more about them. So I will be sharing kind of my end of March, beginning of April wrap up of books. So the first one that I finished was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. These are essays written by Ta-Nehisi Coates almost in like a letter form to his son. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a very well-known journalist and he writes, I believe, for The Atlantic, and these are just essays to his son, kind of reckoning and dealing with and thinking through what it is like and his experiences of being a Black man in America and kind of the Black experience. He grew up in Baltimore, so specifically kind of looking at his lifestyle growing up. He's talking to his son. This is a very raw, open, and honest portrayal. And I think it's very important to go into this knowing that these are someone's personal experiences, their personal reckonings, their personal kind of thoughts. This isn't like a book, I feel like, written to the white community to like tell you how to be better. Like, that's not what this book is. This is like talking to his son through these things. And I think because it wasn't specifically written for a white audience in mind, you know, he's writing to his Black son, I think that just gives it a whole nother level of honesty and openness and just grit. This was a very hard listen, but something that I am so glad that I did listen to it. I did listen to it on audiobook. I will say that he writes like a journalist, but in a beautiful and just full-bodied way, and there were so many passages that you know, I'd listen and then I would rewind 5 minutes and listen to it again because I just wanted to understand the nuance of what he was saying. And so I think it was a good listen. Ta-Nehisi Coates narrates it, so that adds a whole nother level of, you know, emotion and kind of grit to it. I think hearing someone's personal experiences from them, that was cool, but I think I wish I would have read it first physically and been able to underline it and think about some of those passages that really struck me and then listen to it. But this is a book I will be purchasing. I think it is a book that a lot of people could really gain from. I think that this book is meant to draw some sort of emotion, and it definitely did that for me. I thought this was wonderful. I didn't give it a rating. I think this is the kind of book that personally I don't know how to rate it. Like, it's someone's personal experiences, and it was hard for me, so I just decided not to, because I think it's okay not to rate books if you don't feel comfortable doing that. So, but would totally recommend it. I think that this is a wonderful book. I know it's been highly praised, but if you haven't picked it up yet, I highly suggest that you do. Yeah, so Between the World and Me, it was great, and like I said, audiobook was great. I just think you need to give it more time. It's not just an audiobook you can throw on and expect to get a lot from. Like, you really need to think, or I at least really need to think and process what he was saying with his writing. The next book that I finished at the beginning of April was North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I absolutely adored this book. This follows Margaret Hale and John Thornton. They are kind of our 2 main protagonists, but Margaret is from the idyllic, beautiful South, and John Thornton is a mill owner in Milton, and this is kind of a sooty, dirty northern town. So we have these 2 contrasts, also 2 kind of ideologies being contrasted and challenged. And what I loved about this book was that Gaskell definitely has clear views and like clear political standings. And like you see in the idyllic South, and with Margaret Hale's opinions of just, you know, humanity, human rights, kind of your freedom to enjoy nature, and then we have these northern ideals of capitalism, working hard and really just, you know, earning and working your way up, and you know, if you have to crush the underman to do that, like that's a byproduct. And so you see these 2 kind of ideals being battled out, but what's so cool is that I feel like Gaskell doesn't tell you one is more right than the other. She just has so much character growth and development, and you kind of see these ideas merge and how they can work together. So I thought that was wonderful. There's a character in here named Higgins who is like a crusty on the outside but warm and gushy on the inside character. Those are just my absolute favorite characters to read about. There is love, there is, you know, social and political intrigue in this. There is, you know, family drama. So definitely was a page turner. I love that Gaskell has working class people in her novels, so you're not always just reading about high society or you know, people who are just kind of like almost unrealistic. Like you're reading about working class people in this, and I think that makes it a much more relatable classic. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still like those manner constraints and just the constraints of the time, but I do think you're getting a little more honesty and candor with like the types of people that she's writing about. So absolutely love this. So excited to pick up more of Gaskell's work, and I think if you have not seen this, or excuse me, if you haven't read this, you definitely should, and I would love to chat about it with you if you have. The next book that I finished in April was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I adored this book. I am so glad that Krista picked this for her book club, because I probably would have kept putting it off, and I'm so glad that I finally picked it up and read it. Emily St. John Mandel writes beautifully. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian story after a huge flu epidemic has wiped out most of the world's population. And Emily St. John Mandel writes in the present day, so like our present times. She writes in the past, and she writes a story in the future after the flu epidemic has happened. And she's writing about a ton of different characters, a ton of different storylines, and that should have been just so confusing, but she does it so seamlessly, so beautifully. It's like she leaves you this trail of breadcrumbs, and you just pick it up and you become more full as you follow the breadcrumbs and eat and just become so satisfied with this story. I loved this book, and I think that it gets all the praise that it deserves. I loved her writing style. It was beautiful, and the way that she writes about things that are so mundane in our modern society, like electricity and refrigerators and, you know, I don't know what else, but it was just so beautiful. Like, it almost moved me to tears, like the way that she just puts magic into the everyday. And I also loved just, you know, the bonds and the kind of resiliency of the human spirit that is shown in this. I also thought it was such a reminder of how like fleeting the things of the world that we build up are, and I thought it was so cool being portrayed through like seeing the imagery of the wilderness coming up around this broken world, but also kind of the fleetingness of like language and art and music, and how like we as humans, we carry those things and we have to carry them for them to continue, and how fragile of a system that really is, and just to really think about that. And I will definitely be reading whatever Emily St. John Mandel puts out and want to go read her other novels. This was wonderful, and I think what a great book like for someone coming out of YA to read, you know, who's wanting to explore adult novels more. I think people who like fantasy and science fiction would like this. I think people who read literary fiction would like this. Like, I think this ticks so many genres and boxes, and I think this is a book that a lot of people could love, and it does get a lot of love, and I totally understand why. I read this really slowly, but I was glad to. I wanted to savor every bit of it. It has a magical cover, probably one of my favorite covers of any book, and it has a magical story inside. So very, very happy to have finished this. And then the last book that I have recently finished is Redeployment by Phil Clay. This is a short story collection all about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So think kind of Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, but for a modern war. I loved The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, and I think I kind of put some unfair expectations on these stories. I did listen to this on audiobook mostly, and then I read along some. I got a copy from the library. I really enjoyed the narrator of the audiobook, and I did definitely enjoy this. I thought that kind of the, you know, it dealt with war, people dealing with war, the effects of war, and kind of, I think, from a civilian's point of view, how you know, we're never going to be able to understand fully what, you know, the people have sacrificed to fight in this war, but, you know, just being or trying to be as empathetic as we can. Like, I think this book would help in that. I liked how it showed how the violence and the war isn't just this external thing that's happening over there, but like the internalness of war for the soldiers, for the civilians, for their families. Felt like a theme in a lot of these stories that like telling the story made it less scary and less real, you know, and being able to share those experiences, kind of become part of a memory of that experience, and how that is just really an important process. And I think these being stories written about war by an author who was a Marine during this time, just I thought that was like a cool thought and theme in these books. My favorite story was definitely Prayer in a Furnace, but I also really enjoyed the title story, Redeployment. I thought Unless It's a Sucking Chest Wound was great, and then 10 Clicks South. But yeah, I enjoyed most of these stories. I will say it follows different protagonists and different people. So you're not only getting the perspective of Marines, but also like different people. Like Prayer in a Furnace was told from a chaplain's point of view, and then they're all told from different jobs that Marines do. So not just people in combat, but someone in an office job, someone doing kind of like human resources, like community building. So you're getting a lot of different perspectives of the war in this story collection. So I thought that was cool as well. So definitely one that I would recommend. It is a hard read. It is a gruesome read, and it was a little frustrating. I felt like how women were portrayed sometime, but I don't know how much of that is to chalk up to like military culture, which I mean, I don't think that's an excuse, but or it was just, I don't know how that is, or like what the author's intent with that was. But I will say a lot of gruesome stuff in here, but they are stories about war. I will read a passage to you from Prayer in a Furnace, probably my favorite passage from the whole thing. And this is a journal entry written by the chaplain, and he says, "I at least thought there would be nobility in war. I know it exists. There are so many stories, and some of them have to be true, but I see mostly normal men trying to do good, beaten down by horror, by their inability to quell their own rages, by their masculine prostrated in their so-called hardness, their desire to be tougher and therefore crueler than their circumstances. And yet I have this sense that this place is holier than back home. Gluttonous, fat, oversexed, over-consuming, materialistic home where we're too lazy to see our own faults. At least here Rodriguez has the decency to worry about hell. The moon is unspeakably beautiful tonight. Ramadi is not. Strange that people live in such a place." So I just thought that was a beautiful passage about that man trying to reckon with what he's seen and experiencing, and just, you know, trying to make sense of it all. And I thought that was just an especially beautiful passage. So yeah, I definitely think if you're interested in gaining some perspective about the war, especially from the people who have had to fight in it, that this would be something to pick up. So that was what I have recently finished. I would love to know if you've read any good books lately, and I hope that you guys are having a great day, and I hope to talk to y'all soon. Bye.